I'm here with Congressman Khanna. You're up next. I guess let me start there. After everything you've heard all day today, what questions do you still want to see Michael Cohen answer when you come back after this vote?
Well, I think the most explosive part were the exhibits, the checks that he offered. And I'm going to question him on that because that's direct evidence that the president directed an illegal scheme that's part of the criminal investigation in the Southern District of New York. So I'm going to ask him to expand on what he knows about that, what he knows about Executive 1 and Executive 2, and the president's involvement in this criminal enterprise.
The Republicans on this committee have tried very hard to discredit him, paint him as an unreliable figure, a liar. We know he's been convicted of that. They talk a lot about this idea that he might get a book deal when he gets out of prison. Do you find him credible? What do you make of this effort to make him essentially a useless witness?
I do, but I think more important, the American people will. What they'll see is Republicans screaming at him and being angry, and Michael Cohen choking up when he's thinking about what his kids are going to think about him. I think Michael Cohen has come off as human. I think he's come off as remorseful. He has nothing to lose, and it's him coming clean. The other point is, every time the Republicans attack him as someone who lied about the Moscow project, they should remember that Trump has said the exact same thing. So I'm glad the Republicans have finally acknowledged that the president has lied.
Are there other threads from this hearing that you think need to be explored? He's talked a lot about Alan Weisselberg, the former Trump executive who was in a lot of these meetings. Right. What would you like to see this committee focus on based on what you've heard here today?
Well, I think the financial crimes are the most serious. I mean, Donald Trump Jr. and Alan Weisselberg basically directed cooking the books and paying him in a way that was financial fraud, and it's being investigated by the Southern District of New York. The president is implicated. I want to hear who else in the Trump family is part of that investigation.
I think one of the criticisms or one of the pushback we'll probably hear from Republicans when this is all said and done is he came right out and said he has no direct evidence of collusion. This is a guy who was side by side with Donald Trump for 10 years. He says he never saw any direct evidence of collusion with the Russians. What do you make of that part of his testimony?
Well, I think they're two separate issues. The Russia investigation will be part of Adam Schiff's investigation, but it's really important for people to understand they're two different things. There's the whole Russia collusion, which Mueller is looking into, but there's a Southern District of New York that's looking into financial crimes that the president, his son, and Weisselberg may have been involved in, and they were involved in it after the president took office. I mean, the idea that the president was directing illegal payment schemes from the Oval Office, you couldn't write this in a movie script. That's the movie script that Republicans ought to be talking about.
We got a little bit of a traffic jam here behind us. You talked a little bit about the checks. You talked about the receipts, if you will. Is this something where you want to see Michael Cohen produce more of these documents? How important were the physical documents that he was able to show this committee in establishing his credibility and establishing what you describe as crimes potential?
I think that's the smoking gun, the check, and that's what I'm going to focus on. The check with Donald Trump Jr.'s signature and Weisselberg's signature. It suggests that Weisselberg and Trump Jr. are Executive 1 and Executive 2. And let's just be clear what they've done. They've cooked the Trump books in committing financial fraud to cover up for payments. And that is a financial fraud crime. It has actually nothing to do with Russia. It's a crime that anyone would commit. And basically, we have the goods now. Cohen is giving the committee and the American public the exhibits. He's not saying, believe me. He's saying, here is the check with their signatures.
Right, the checks don't lie. All right, Congressman, I'll let you go vote. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Katy, here laid out there, again, bringing the receipts, the paperwork here, telling the story, buttressing Michael Cohen's credibility. One thing left, there is only Democratic members left of this committee. So when they resume after this vote series, I think you'll see a slightly different tone here, a slightly more of a build-up potentially, because you won't have the back and forth that we've gotten used to over the last few hours. Unclear still if they'll do a second round of questioning, but in this first round, only Democrats to go.
I want to focus on that evidence, and in order to do that, let's bring in NBC News intelligence and national security reporter Ken Delanian, MSNBC chief legal correspondent and host of The Beat, Ari Melber, columnist and founder of DC Report, David K. Johnston. He's also the author of The Making of Donald Trump, and former federal prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst Glenn Kirshner. That's not all. Former chief of staff at the CIA and DOD and MSNBC national security analyst Jeremy Bash, and former federal prosecutor Carol Lamb. Ari, first to you. Khanna said the checks are the evidence they need. The checks are the smoking gun. Are the checks the smoking gun? Do they prove that Donald Trump knew he was paying Michael Cohen back for a hush money payment to a woman to cover up an affair in order to affect the outcome of the election?
Yeah. I mean, I think that is clear. That's a problem for the people involved. It's probably not what the Congress has traditionally considered a quote-unquote high crime, but it goes to why it is not enough to attack Michael Cohen's credibility or history of lying, because this is all about material that other people are involved in with evidence.
So